Mark 7 Unchecked Outflow of Human Chests. Low-slung leather couches circle a low oak coffee table where open Bibles rest beside half-empty mugs, the ambient hum of the church foyer fading to a dense, immediate quiet inside the young adult lounge. The overhead track lighting casts a warm, sharp focus over the five friends as the casual pre-study banter drops away entirely. Andrew leans forward with his thumbs hooked in his Bible's leather spine, his eyes sweeping across the tight circle. All right, let's pick up right at verse 14 where Jesus calls the crowd back to him, because he's about to completely dismantle the religious elite's obsession with ceremonial hand-washing and external boundary markers. The scribes from Jerusalem traveled all this way just to play hygiene police, accusing the disciples of being defiled because they didn't do the rabbinic ritual scrubbing, but Jesus pivots hard from their external legalism by shifting the entire conversation to basic anatomy, telling them that nothing entering a man from the outside can defile him because it doesn't go into his heart but into his stomach, and then it's eliminated. Chloe crosses her legs, tapping her chin with her pen as she tracks the text. It's wild how easily they weaponized those external traditions to maintain an illusion of social purity, using clean hands to mask dirty systemic oppression, which is exactly why Jesus declaring all foods clean in verse 19 is such a massive structural shockwave to their whole cultural sorting mechanism. Jordan thumps his knuckles against the table, nodding firmly. It's a total reality check on practical utility. You can wash the bricks and clean the job site all day long, but if the foundation blueprints are warped, the building is still going to collapse under its own weight, which means all that ceremonial scrubbing was just high-effort cosmetic maintenance on a structural failure. Maya wraps her hands around her warm mug, her voice dropping into a quiet, intense focus. They were just terrified of looking at what was actually happening underneath the surface, using those rigid rulebooks as an emotional shield because it's so much easier to obsess over unwashed hands than it is to sit in the raw, terrifying reality of your own underlying motivations. Ethan takes a deep, deliberate breath, slipping a folded piece of paper out from his Bible and setting it flat on the table right over verse 20 as his eyes lock onto Andrew. This is exactly where the internal architecture shifts, because when Jesus says, "What comes out of a man, that defiles a man," he isn't just diagnosing a surface-level behavioral glitch. He's uncovering a massive, automated manufacturing plant that has been running unchecked since the plains of Shinar. I've been reading this piece on the Babel engine, and it maps Mark 7 directly against Genesis 11, showing that when God looked at the tower and said, "Nothing they propose to do will be withheld from them," the Hebrew word there for propose is zamam, which explicitly means to plot or manufacture a dark, devious scheme. What Babel is on a corporate macroeconomic scale, where collective human wills coordinate without vertical accountability to build a mechanized nightmare. The unregenerate human heart is on an individual scale, which means things like Auschwitz, the gulags, or ancient tyrannies aren't freak political mutations or external systemic failures. They are just the internal blueprint of the heart gaining enough traction to scale up into industrialized horror. Chloe leans in closer, her eyes scanning the text as the weight of the connection hits. So the confusion of languages at Babel wasn't some hostile, jealous, cosmic overreaction. It was actually a severe divine mercy to throw a massive structural speed bump into our collective machinery, because left to our own devices, our shared internal corruption would scale into total devastation instantly, proving that the world isn't contaminating us. We are actively contaminating the world. Jordan leans his elbows on his knees, his jaw tightening as the abstract philosophy turns concrete. That means the malicious gossip we shrug off in the church hallway and the bureaucratic cruelty of a concentration camp are being forged on the exact same factory floor behind our ribs. Because every broken contract, every corporate exploitation, and every systemic ruin is just the internal output of the heart getting assembled outwardly by our own hands. Andrew taps his finger directly onto the open text of verse 21, anchoring the group's gaze to the stark reality of the words. Look at the precise inventory Jesus unrolls right here. Out of the heart of men proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. He deliberately mixes catastrophic historical violence with commonplace mental dispositions to prove they share the exact same origin point, meaning, we don't become sinful by committing these acts. We commit these acts because our heart is an active, highly efficient engine of sin apart from grace. Maya pulls her knees up toward her chest, looking down at the list with a sober, heavy clarity. It completely strips away our capacity for self-delusion, because we love to blame our environments, our upbringings, or our broken social systems to preserve our own innocence, but Jesus is pointing his finger straight at our chests and saying the internal rail yard of sin is completely self-funded. Andrew looks around the circle, his voice soft but unyielding as he closes the text. Which is why every human attempt at behavioral reform, political restructuring, or religious legalism will always collapse into disaster if it only tries to clean up the external pollution while leaving the internal manufacturing plant running at full capacity. We don't need a better filter for the old engine. We need the engine completely seized, broken down, and radically replaced by the deep structural reconstruction that only His grace can achieve.